Ahead on Straight Talk.
We're going to end mail-in voting.
President Donald Trump says he'll move to end mail-in voting nationwide, the system Oregon and Washington use for elections.
You can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots.
We sit down with Oregon Secretary of State Tobias Read, who's defending vote by mail and responding to the new Justice Department requests for voter data.
We follow the Constitution in Oregon, which says clearly that states run elections.
Plus the start of COVID kindergartners.
We realize that there's some things we're going to have to problem solve.
This year, the 3.6 million babies born in 2020 are heading into the classroom for the first time. We'll look at what that means for the state's youngest learners and what educators and parents can do to help students thrive. Right now on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. Thanks for joining us. I'm Stephanie Domerat. Now, Oregon has voted by mail for a quarter century after Oregonians approved of all mail elections in 1998. Weeks ago, President Donald Trump renewed claims that vote by mail is corrupt without evidence and said he'd try to eliminate it nationally. It's now sparking new debate over who controls U.S. elections. Today, Oregon Secretary of State Tobias Read joins us to talk about Oregon's elections and the vote by mail system and how his office is responding to federal pressure and voter data demands. He stepped into this role at the start of the year and previously served as Oregon's treasurer and in the state legislature. Secretary Read, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
It's great to have you. I want to start first, big picture. So in November of 2000, quite a while ago, Oregon became the first state to incorporate an all vote by mail system for the presidential election. So first, why are people who are advocates for this system or people who are fans of it support this?
I think it's really clear. We were the first state to do it in the country because it works, because you don't have to be in a specific place in order to exercise a fundamental American right. Think about how this plays out across Oregon. We're a big geographic state, so someone who lives in a rural part of the state, someone who is elderly, somebody who works at an hourly job, all of those people get to fit voting into their complicated lives. They can do it where they are, in their living rooms or around their kitchen tables, and engage in the fundamental act of democracy and hold politicians accountable.
So in remarks at the White House, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we heard the president bring up mail-in voting. This is what he had to say. Take a listen.
So we're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt.
When you heard this, what was your initial reaction?
Well, I think it's clear that the president knows his actions in his administration are not popular, and he's trying to rig this system, make it harder for people to vote. He was a person who voted by mail, even in as recently as as the 2024 campaign. He was promoting mail-in elections. And I think he may have forgotten this is how deployed troops vote. So is he really suggesting that our military members who are defending our country should not be allowed to vote? This is not a realistic suggestion. And he also forgets the oath that he swore to uphold the Constitution. It says very clearly in Article 1, Section 4, states run elections, not the president by executive order.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But were you surprised when you heard this? Did this feel out of the blue for you?
I mean, it's all part of everything, it feels to me like the president is doing, trying to avoid public scrutiny. We could talk about any number of issues where he is trying to make it harder for people to express their dissatisfaction. To vote is fundamental to that. So, I mean, it's surprising in that it's so brazen and so unconstitutional, but it's not surprising in the sense that he's trying to avoid public scrutiny and accountability.
So one of the reasons that he is talking about getting rid of mail-in voting, and he mentioned, you heard there, was the room for fraud and corruption. I want to ask you what Oregon data can suggest about fraud or security when it comes to mail-in voting.
It suggests that we have the gold standard. We have paper ballots. They are verified with forensic analysis of signatures. They are reviewed by teams of two people of different parties to make sure that the voter intent is accurately captured, and these paper ballots can be audited after the fact. This is why other states move in our direction, why 34 other countries use mail-in elections. It's something that people should aspire to, not be moving away from.
The other thing was that he mentioned that mail-in voting is really costly. Can you talk to me about the cost of running the elections in Oregon this way?
he is wrong. It is less expensive to run elections this way. I've been on a tour. I've met with 30 of Oregon's 36 county clerks and election officials now, and every one of them recognize the cost and impracticality of moving away from mail-in elections. Think about what we'd have to do. We have to hire people to staff these buildings. We have to redraw precincts. We have to do everything that would move away from what we've been doing for 25 years.
Do you actually,
it's not wrong.
Yeah, do you actually know the difference though of the cost from before Oregon took this system on?
I've not calculated that, but it's 25 years of improvement, and so it would be multiples. I'm very confident in saying it would be substantially more expensive, as well as reducing turnout. What we get in Oregon as a result of mail-in elections are higher turnout, lower costs, higher security, all the things that we want more of, not less of.
It isn't just President Trump who isn't favorable to mail-in voting. There are other people who are not in favor, other politicians and other citizens who aren't for it. The Pew Research Center actually found that 58% of Americans are in favor of allowing people, so the majority are, to cast their ballot by mail, though Republicans are much less supportive than Democrats, it shows. Here are the numbers. So 83% of Democrats are in support versus 32% of Republicans. What do you say to skeptics of this here in Oregon?
I say, pay attention to how this works and interact with it. These conversations with county clerks have been very instructive, and we've done some things, some mail-in ballot ride-alongs leading up to the May election, where we can pull back the curtain and allow people to see what happens when their ballot is returned. I think people feel a lot better about the controls and the procedures and the security that's involved in that. We also know that, it's interesting, those numbers, I wonder if they are national, because I think people who have experienced elections.
Yes, those are national. Thank you.
I think people in Oregon feel a lot better about this. In fact, there was a bill proposed in the last legislature that would have asked the question whether people want to continue with elections. That set a record for the amount of testimony received online at the legislature system. 85% of people who wrote in to say what they thought about this were opposed to the bill and in favor of continuing mail-in elections. This is what Oregonians chose. I'm really confident that most people want to continue it, and that's why we're going to defend our right to make our own choices about elections in Oregon.
Why do you think there is this divide then? Do you think it is mostly for people who haven't experienced this?
That's my guess. I mean, I would be interested in that number in Oregon. The best analog we have, I think, is that bill and how people weighed in. But I think people really like being able to vote in their homes, at their kitchen table, consulting their voter's pamphlet or their spouse or whatever they want to do. It's convenient. The rest of the world and the economy and everything that advances in the world is generally aimed at making things more convenient for people to fit into complicated lives. And so when it comes to a fundamental American right, voting and holding politicians accountable, it makes no sense to me that we'd make that harder for people. We're a stronger state, a stronger country when more people participate, and we want more of that.
You touched on it a little bit, but we also heard President Trump say that the U.S. is likely the only country that votes by mail. You mentioned that isn't true. Do you know which other countries do that?
There's 34 of them, and in real time, when the president made that comment, Time Magazine fact-checked him immediately. So I don't have all 34 memorized, but there's a reason, because it's convenient, because it works, because people have confidence in it.
So when it comes to taking action to stop voting by mail here in Oregon, on Truth Social, the president recently wrote, let's see here, quote, "Remember, the states are merely an agent for the federal government in counting and tabulating the votes. They must do what the federal government, as represented by the president of the United States, tells them for the good of our country to do," end quote. So the Constitution does say that the states control the election process. But what would happen if, say, tomorrow, Congress passed a law to ban vote by mail? What would happen here?
Well, I would be shocked if Congress could do something that momentous in a day. We're ready for that conversation if the Congress wants to have it, because I think we will have a bipartisan, nonpartisan coalition across the country who recognize that this is good for Republicans, Democrats, Independents. It doesn't favor any party, it favors participation, which makes it stronger for us. So we'll be able to have that conversation, and I think our congressional delegation is well positioned to make the case for our good results and why that would be a bad move for the country.
So if it did happen, though, I mean, would that be something Oregon would respond to? I mean, how would that even look?
We follow the law and the Constitution in Oregon, and that would have to be a conversation. They can't pass something, I mean, I would be shocked if they could pass something overnight, and I think people would have a very strong argument that it's a bad idea.
Okay. A few months ago, the Department of Justice filed a statement of interest into Oregon's voting system. We've covered this in our reporting to see if it was doing enough to scrub voter rolls of ineligible voters, so people who shouldn't be listed anymore, and also access public voter information as well. Then more recently, the DOJ asked for your office to provide broad voter data. Just last week, you responded and rejected that request. Why did you do that, and where do you stand on that now?
My obligation is to protect Oregonians and to protect their data and their privacy. The federal government is exceeding their authority in this regard. They are entitled to public records like anyone else, and if they want to fill out the form and pay the fee, we'll provide them that public record. But it does not include social security numbers, dates of birth, signatures, driver's license information, and that's the status.
Did you understand or get any sense of why they were asking for that data?
No, my suspicions are present, but I think it again is part of this effort to undermine our system of voting and to make it harder for people to vote.
What are you willing to disclose and not disclose to the administration?
I'm willing to disclose the public records to which they are entitled, and I'm not willing to expose or share the private information of Oregonians. We have privacy laws in this state for a good reason.
Did you get a response from the administration on that letter back that you sent?
Not yet.
Okay, do you anticipate that?
I am sure that this is not the last time we're going to hear from the U.S. Department of Justice and their interest in the voter information of Oregonians, but people can be confident I will stand up for them.
Where does the other investigation stand that they mentioned they were doing several months ago? Where does that stand now into Oregon's voting systems?
I'm not sure I have an answer to that. There's a lot of uncertainty with what the administration is doing. What I can say is that we are confident that we are upholding high standards with our system. We're always looking for ways to make our system stronger and more secure and better. We've uncovered some of those opportunities and we're pursuing them.
So last year, before you were in office, Oregon paused its automatic voter registration program through the DMV for about 6 months or so, after the DMV registered more than 1,600 ineligible voters. A report later found that the number of those people who actually cast their ballot was quite low. Where does that stand now, and what new controls have been put in place to make sure this doesn't happen anymore?
We put in a number of controls, and I first want to say that was the result of a government error. It is not acceptable, and we are moving forward with additional steps that make it less likely that will happen again. In fact, we got an audit recently, an independent audit, that confirms that those steps are having the effect that we want. These are really basic things, like a control file that comes when data is transmitted from the DMV to the Secretary of State's office that says this is how many records we're sending, so we can confirm that we're getting the right things. A random sampling process that allows us to go back and say, recheck these again and make sure that we haven't uncovered any errors. A process by which folks from our team and the election side, the audit side, and county clerks will go visit the DMV to make sure that the controls and changes they've implemented are continuing and are being implemented faithfully. So we look at these as a floor, not a ceiling. We're always going to look for new ways to add additional security, but I think we are on the right path, and people can feel confident about that.
And how many people did end up voting who were not eligible to vote?
We can't say that definitively in the Secretary of State's office because we don't have access to all of that information. What we ended up referring was a very small number in the low single digits for further investigation. Your description, I think, is accurate when you start with a bigger number and continually figure out who didn't vote, who was a citizen. This really just underscores the fact that the registration process, the data that was collected at the DMV and ultimately transferred, was not good. And that's why this audit is reassuring that we have improved the processes to do that, so the likelihood of that happening again is substantially reduced.
Okay, you've been in office for about 8 months now. Looking ahead, what are your biggest priorities when it comes to this role?
My biggest priority is earning the trust of Oregonians. We are stronger when more people are voting, making sure that we're so lucky in Oregon to have a convenient system, but people still have to make that choice. And so, democracy is a fragile thing. John Lewis used to like to say that it's not a state, it's an act. So people need to vote. People need to participate. My priority is making sure that is a process that people can engage in, that they feel confident about. And then the Secretary of State's office also, we haven't talked about it yet, is the auditor for the state. So making sure that we are narrowing the gap between our good intentions and a great outcomes. So executing so that people feel good about the value they're getting for the tax dollars they spend.
Have you been hearing from a lot of citizens? I know your office has kind of come into the national spotlight recently. Have you been hearing from a lot of people who are concerned or asking you to do more right now?
yeah, I think people are concerned. There's lots of reasons to be nervous about the direction our country is headed in, I think, and people are motivated to defend their right to vote. It's fundamental. It's core to who we are as Americans, and people don't want us to give up on that. So lots of our conversation is about our system of voting, about defending the data that they have, and not giving it up to an administration that does not seem to have a commitment to protecting that kind of privacy.
Oregon Secretary of State Tobias Read, thank you so much for coming in today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate your time. And still ahead here on Straight Talk, as kids start the new school year, a new era is beginning for COVID kindergartners. It's the first time kids born after the pandemic head into the classroom. We talked to an education expert about what this could mean going forward. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Straight Talk. Thanks for joining us today. Now, as kids start the school year, we are seeing a new generation of kindergartners. They include the 3.6 million babies who were born across the U.S. in 2020 when the pandemic shut down schools, workplaces, and daily life. Now, this group is now walking into elementary school for the first time after spending their earliest months in small family bubbles. We don't yet know all the long-term impacts, but some studies point to small language and learning delays in early childhood. Now, as Oregon welcomes its first COVID kindergartners, the state also faces lingering educational challenges. Last year, compared nationally, Oregon's fourth graders ranked second worst in math and near the bottom of the list in reading. Now, chronic absenteeism also among the worst in the country. But there is hope, especially for our youngest learners. Joining us to talk more about early childhood education is Sarah Pope, the executive director of the nonprofit Stand for Children Oregon. Before joining Stand for Children, Pope served as the chief of staff for Oregon's first appointed state superintendent. Through her work at Stand for Children, Pope advocates for research-based initiatives to be implemented in Oregon schools with the goal of supporting students' academic success. Sarah, thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie.
It's wild to think that now, 5 years later, these are our kindergartners going into school. Of course, early childhood learning, such an important time. What do you think that parents and educators should keep in mind as these little ones head into kindergarten for the first time?
It's such an exciting time. It feels almost like Christmas, right? I mean, it's the start of something new. It's not even a new chapter, right? But like a new book. I don't know if your Instagram feed is just filled with pictures of kids going off for their first day of school. But I think it's just so important to remember there's so much potential in our children, and that families send their best and brightest to our schools every day. We have exceptional educators in Oregon, and really the sky's the limit. And so I think mostly it's that excitement and maintaining that throughout the year. But as a parent of younger children and also doing the education policy research that I do, it's also really important for parents and for educators to be talking regularly about, is my child on track? Now, everyone shows up in kindergarten, some from different places. Maybe they had preschool, maybe they didn't, maybe they were home. But most importantly, all kids have potential to be strong readers by the end of third grade. And so having those conversations with the teacher regularly and knowing, like, what does it mean to be on track to be a strong reader? What should I be looking for in my child's development? How can I help that at home? If I have questions or concerns, how do I reach out to my teacher? Those conversations are so important to start early. And I found there's just not as much information once you have children who start to enter public schools. When you have young babies, it's much more common to know, oh, this is what my 6-month-old should know and be able to do. Here's what my 12-month-old should know and be able to do. And it just gets less and less informative, I think, as kids get older, but just as important.
So you talked about it a little bit, but preschool, it's pretty wild that many kids in our state really don't have access to preschool. Like, why? How important is that access, and really, what does the gap look like in the state?
It's pretty significant. Education advocacy for STAND, we really generally start kind of kindergarten through 12th grade. So I'm not the preschool expert, but the last study I saw, we're behind in terms of the numbers of 4-year-olds who get formal preschool before starting kindergarten. And, you know, the brain is developing so quickly in those young ages that preschool really sets children up, the research shows, for success, not just later in life, but for a strong start in kindergarten. So we are a little behind on that. That does make it more challenging for kids and for families and for schools, but something we can overcome. Ironically, the last data set I was looking at, we have more 3-year-olds, I almost call them third graders, they're not that old yet, more 3-year-olds in early preschool than we do 4-year-olds. So, you know, opportunities to grow on the 4-year-olds.
And hopefully, as they get older, we have more kids that have more access
Right.
to preschool.
Right.
Your organization focuses primarily on early literacy and the science of reading. Now, national tests show that Oregon's fourth graders, as I mentioned, when it comes to reading, are really low on the list. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's really alarming because, as I said earlier, right, we have such talented educators in our state. Our children are just as strong as, children anywhere in this country. So there's no reason for us to be in the bottom. So we spend a lot of time analyzing why and then trying to learn from research and other states, sometimes other countries, but mostly other states. What are they doing differently? So the research I've seen and the analysis we've done, we really attribute it to three things. Other states that have made bigger gains, and bigger gains post-pandemic especially, had much tighter statewide focus than we do in Oregon. Our state hasn't provided much focus at all. And the states like Mississippi, actually, and Illinois and Tennessee that are rebounding faster have more statewide focus. The second thing we look at a lot and we think contributes, according to the research, is we have really high rates of kids not coming to school regularly. And so that hurts you, right? I mean, it's hard to become a strong reader if you're not in school. And the third thing we're starting to analyze a little bit more is our really short school year. We've known for a while our school year's short relative to the national average. We anticipate it's actually gotten shorter, so we're digging into that data right now. But those three things contribute a lot.
Wow. Yeah, we'll talk more about the absenteeism because that is an issue that's been something people have been looking at in Oregon for quite some time. Now, during the pandemic, many toddlers spent more time on screens, right? And less time with peers, less talking to people who weren't in their bubble. Are we seeing that play out in language behavior in maybe today's first through fifth graders who did have that interrupted school time?
Yeah, it's been really impactful. I mean, you talk to educators, I talk to my kids' own teachers, but you talk to educators across the state, and there's a lot of emphasis on the social emotional learning. There's a big concern that the big behavior we're seeing in schools is a result of not enough kind of socializing in the younger ages before entering school. And I was thinking on my way over, today's fifth graders were the kindergartners that had to do kindergarten online.
Yeah.
And so they're still young. They're not yet in middle school in most school systems. And so the impact is significant. I would just say, I think, because I talk about this a lot with policymakers, unfortunately, all kids around the world, but especially in the US, experience COVID. And yet we see kids in other states reading at higher levels, even after having experienced the same social emotional challenges around their development that kids in Oregon do. So yes, impact is significant, and we can be doing more academically.
What can be done around the chronic absenteeism? This has been an issue in Oregon, and we talked about it a little bit, but what do you think really can be done to help this?
Yeah, the states where we're seeing the biggest gains around attendance have done a couple of things statewide. And schools are trying different things in Oregon, but like I said at the beginning, we haven't had really clear statewide focus, and this is an area where we have not had clear statewide focus. So we've sort of typically funded around attendance work, lots of different places to try lots of different things. Well, the research is really clear. The most important thing to do is to know, is Sarah about to become chronically absent, right? So the school needs to be looking at data. Real humans and real schools need to be looking at the data day by day, week by week to know before my attendance, for instance, or my daughter's attendance becomes, really too much. Or the attendance is never too much, but the absenteeism is too much. So knowing the data and then calling home. Especially in those early grades, we see really high rates of chronic absenteeism in that first year. And so calling home and finding out, hey, I've noticed that your child has been missing, they're about to become chronically absent, like what can we do in a really positive, affirming way to bring your child back to school regularly? So the data and then the human reach out. The states that have done that have seen 5, 10%, sometimes double-digit gains just in that alone. Now, obviously, there's lots of complicated reasons that some families and some kids miss school, but for a statewide strategy, that's a good place to start.
We only have about a minute left. I want to ask you, what are you hopeful right now about the education system, and what should parents who have those little ones K through 3 really keep in mind right now?
Reading is so critical. Reading. So talking to your reading and writing go together. So talking to your teacher about how's my child doing? What can I do to support reading and writing? Are they on track? Are they not on track? How do you know? So critical. I'm also hopeful because in Oregon, I said we haven't always had much statewide focus. We have a little bit more this year. We're starting to grow in that area. And I'm excited to see this year's kindergartens really get to benefit from that statewide focus around literacy.
And I know we talked about it a little bit too before, but hopefully this, going forward for these kindergartners, this will be untouched, right? Like uninterrupted. And I guess last year's was also, but hopefully we'll be able to see those gains.
Yeah, yep. It's a good start to a new year.
Sarah Pope with Stand for Children, thanks for being with us today.
Thank
We really
you.
appreciate your time. And thank you so much for watching. If you have an idea or a person you'd like us to interview here on Straight Talk, we'd love to hear from you. You can just send us an email to the address you see here on your screen, straighttalk@kgw.com. And a reminder, you can stream Straight Talk on your own schedule anytime. You can download the free KGW Plus app, available now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next week on Straight Talk.